Hello, welcome back to another episode of Training for Service Tools. Today we are going to be doing services. So Service Tools is based on products and services and putting those two together in an efficient way to create proposals and line items that can be checked off and whatnot. So last video we went over vendors so that we can start importing products, and services are required to import products as well. So we're going to start that. We'll go over into the menu here under settings and go down to services is where that lives. And you can see I've got a couple set up here already. Basically, there are two different modes of practice that I see people utilize with these services. One is an hourly type of service, and the other one is like an a la carte type service. So I'll explain that a little bit more. An a la carte service is something kind of like this, where you'd have a basic base price for something like install television. And then you could have different choices, like how big is the television, and then different options that you could use to add to that base price. So the base price is where the price for that service starts, and then you can modify it from there depending on what situation you're into. So this would give you a price range of $120 to $400 if everything was chosen, and the biggest choice over here was chosen. So that's an a la carte service. An hourly service is obviously based on hours. So you could do it one of two different ways. This is probably the more advanced way, where you would take a base price of 0 and then different hourly types of labor. The default quantity would be 1 hour, and then the cost for that kind of labor per hour. At that point, what you would do is if a particular product was going to take a half an hour of design time, you would put in this when you're entering the line item into the quote. We'll get to that later, but to set this up, we would default all of these to 1. I'll show you how that works when we get into the line items. That way you can really kind of narrow down exactly what types of labor are involved in each product and charge accordingly for that. Sometimes that's a little bit easier than a la carte. Sometimes it's a little bit harder. Everybody likes to do it differently, so you kind of have a choice. And this is kind of nice because when you are dropping an installation labor service into a line or into a quote, the quantity for the service would basically be kind of like a difficulty factor, where 1 would be a normal difficulty factor, and 1.5 would mean that installation service is going to be 50% more difficult, and you charge 50% more for it. So that all kind of lines out pretty well. You can do this however you want. So the other way of doing this is, we'll close these, minimize those real quick. You can just hit the plus icon here to add another service. It'll ask you what you want it to be called, and we can just call this hourly. Let's say you charge $100 an hour. If you can check or uncheck this in a quote, you can set different discounts. Adjustments is what we call them, to the total of a quote. And if you don't want this to be discounted, you can just uncheck that. So that can be handy for things like trip charges, shipping, things like that you don't want to be discounted. But for a regular hourly rate, maybe you charge a little discount for some people. Who knows? We'll keep that checked for now. So basically, this as it is would just be quantity 1 would be 1 hour's worth of labor. Quantity 2 would be 2 hours, so on and so forth. You could continue to do choices here where maybe we do maybe it's hourly installation or hourly service call or hourly design time, and then you could do something like a trip option, trip charge. Things like that. So maybe we say $30 trip charge. Installation is going to be, and this is going to be a dollar amount. So we could maybe make that 0, and then depending on the kind, we do 100, 125, and maybe design time is right at, I don't know, $75. Just throwing numbers out there. What that would give you is different options. When you drop this into a quote, you'd have to choose either installation, service call, or design time, and that would be your base. And then you'd add trip charges to that, and it would all come together nicely there. So you got a lot of options here. Try to keep it simple to set up. Some of these can get a little more complicated, but once you get your head wrapped around it, it makes a lot more sense and it goes pretty quickly. Then once you do get all these services set up, then they can usually just sit there and you don't have to change them too much. If you do edit them, they will not affect any quotes or work orders from the past, so that's good. Everything just goes from that point on. Any service order or service line items that you drop into a quote will reflect the new information. So that's about it. This is how you minimize it and see it. This is how you edit it. And here's how you insert a new one. You can always, we'll cancel that. You can actually rearrange these too, so these will show up in whatever order you want them to. A lot of people like them in alphabetical order just because they like it that way. It's easier for them to find. Some people like to categorize them by hourly types or other various things. So you can do whatever you want there, and that will show up in this order in the services list, which we'll go over here in packages, work orders, and quotes. So that about wraps it up for services. Thanks for watching this training video. The next thing we're going to go into is importing our contacts and products, so we can really start using this thing. Should be some good info, and we'll see you there.